Do you need or want to run a one-shot? Are you intimidated by fitting an entire quest into one gaming session? Are you worried that your players may not enjoy it? Well, then you're in the right place, and I've got you covered. Welcome to GM Philosophy, where our whole mission is to empower GMs to run the best and most fulfilling games they can. I'm JW, one of the philosophers here, and I started DMing back around 1984-ish. Before I tell you how to do one-shots, hit the like and subscribe buttons and set the bell icon to all. It really helps the channel and helps me to continue creating this content for you. One-shots. Almost every DM, GM needs to run one now and then, whether it's to help players acclimate to a game during session 0 or session 0.5, or you're a DM, doing a holiday game, a vacation game, a game for newbies, or at a convention, you're probably going to have at least one session where you'll have to wrap things up right then and there within 3 to 5 hours. Here's the short version of what to do without all the helpful detail that I'll go into later. 1. 6 encounters or less. Consider 6 encounters or less. Essentially, being given the quest plus 5 potential encounters based on the 5-room dungeon. Google that. And note the word potential. With the exception of the quest receiving and the boss fight, and maybe even them, everything else is optional. If the PCs don't experience an encounter or 3, don't worry about it. Number 2, skip travel. Skip travel. Unless there's a planned encounter en route to another encounter, the PCs just go from the tavern to the dungeon entrance or whatever thing or they're describing or role-playing of how that happened. They're just there, straight from the quest to there. Number 3, 2-ish combats. For most tables, stick to 2 combats for a 3-hour session, one of medium difficulty, and then the more difficult climactic boss battle. Now, if your tables tend to run fast combats and love combat more than anything, maybe try to sneak in another 1 or 2, but it's better to underestimate than overestimate. If you add more combats, be ready to skip them if time is working against you. 4. Railroad. A little. Railroad a bit if there's supposed to be a cohesive story. There's no time for character developing side quests in a one-shot. They have to solve the mystery or overthrow the warlord or whatever in one session. Now, there are ways to do this without pissing off your players, but you'll need to watch the rest of the video to find out how to do that. If the one-shot is just a straight-up dungeon, however, you can ignore this. 5. Skip from boss to epilogue. If you need one more encounter planned with the quest giver or the people saved and there's still time in the session, then skip almost everything between the ending of the boss battle and returning to where the PCs are supposed to be to wind up the game in a satisfactory manner. But do let them find any treasure the boss has or was guarding, okay? Now, there probably isn't time for winding down the story. No falling action. Just get to the epilogue and finish it up. 6. Consider backup pre-generated characters. A PC death is always a possibility, so you might want to have a few pre-gen characters at the ready for if a player's PC dies. If they're needed, have the new PC be around the next corner or in the next room or whatever so that the player doesn't have to wait to keep playing. All right, now, that's the short version. Now, if you're still with me, you may want to get into the nitty-gritty of this and really absorb how to pull it off. So let's go. In just a second. Since we don't have a sponsor, give me 30 seconds to plug myself. Several of us contributing philosophers, but not the GM philosopher Josh, have our own YouTube channels as well. So if you like this video, I invite you to check out my own channel, JW the DM, link below, and watch some of the good content there. Now, and I admit, the early stuff is rough, but there's still good information in it. Now we'll get into the deep dive. Depending on lead time, You may or may not want to pre-generate PCs. In fact, you may need to pre-generate PCs. Because say you're doing a conference game or your players are all brand new and it would take just too long to lead them through character generation. Or maybe it's a last-minute game. This is optional and maybe not even recommended when there's more lead time, or you have veteran players who want to make their own characters or bring in a character they've already rolled up. But if that happens, if they've rolled one up, just be warned. You'll want to vet any character that they bring and see if it would break the game or make it less fun for everyone else. Another reason that pre-gen characters might be preferable. Pitch the adventure to the players beforehand, even if that's at the beginning of the session, if there was no time to do so ahead of time. Keep it to only a few minutes. Give the adventure a title that hints at what the goal of the one-shot will be. For example, published adventure, Curse of Strahd. That's the title. Gives away the goal of the adventure. It wants you to eventually confront Strahd. Curse of Strahd, confront Strahd. You can do this with the title of your adventure. And it makes a really good, it helps out with the plug. Now, to do the more of the plug, go ahead and tell them a little bit about the problem the quest giver is going to pose and what the MacGuffin is or who the BBEG is that they are meant to defeat, as above. You want it to be clear that there shouldn't be any unrelated side quests and that there's an expectation that the PCs will be played with achieving the goal of the one-shot in mind. Now, if this is a simple dungeon crawl, this may not be too complicated. Adventure and rewards are totally acceptable motivations. Now, if there's more lead time and players are creating or bringing their own characters, try to let them know all this information before they show up for the game and give you a chance to scan over their character sheets. Now, I'll be bringing up backup pre-gens later, but these can be used as replacements for player sheets that need to be switched out. Of the up to 6 encounters, 7 if there's an epilogue, the first one is meant to be engaging with the quest giver. Prepare ahead of time a reason why all these PCs are in the right place at the right time and willing to accept the quest hook from the quest giver. Now, there probably wasn't enough time for the players to work on those motives on their own, and maybe not even a lot of incentive to do that, since this isn't a PC for an entire campaign. So consider using pre-generated motives for the players to use, although you can often skip this and just get right to the playing. It doesn't have to be well thought out, or detailed or anything, because remember, it's a one-shot for you too, so don't spend too much time on it. As for the right place at the right time, 9 times out of 10, that's a tavern. And there's a reason having adventures starting in a tavern is such a trope for fantasy role-playing games, because at lower levels, that's possibly the best and easiest way to get things started. Now, there are rumors to hear, bulletins to read, and, best of all, people in there looking for adventurers to help them out with something. It also gives the bare minimum excuse for the PCs to meet each other if they don't already know one another. They're drinking. Well, you have every right to start the adventure anywhere else. And if you're starting the adventure at higher levels, it might be better to start somewhere else. A newish dungeon master with mostly newish players can do far worse than a tavern. I mean, the PCs are all hanging around and a quest giver approaches them with a request or job offer. What could be simpler? After that, you need to know what the next 3 to 5 encounters will be. Now, I'm a big fan of the 5-room dungeon, but I acknowledge calling it that has some serious negatives. First, it doesn't really mean rooms. It means encounters. For example, in Matt Colville's The Delian Tomb, the first couple possible adventure encounters don't actually happen within the dungeon of the tomb, but outside it, outside. So here's one version of what the 5 encounters of the 5-room dungeon are. 1. The Guardian. This is something, creature or puzzle or otherwise, that explains why where the PCs are going to hasn't been invaded and plundered yet. It may or may not result in combat. 2. The social encounter or possible combat. The PCs run into some potential enemies and either sort things out socially or have the first medium level combat. If the first encounter was combat, try to make this one social, but don't force it. It'll do what it does. 3. The puzzle, trap, or setback of some sort. I think that explains itself well enough for our purposes, but know that this is a good place to put clues for completing this adventure or future adventures. 4. The boss fight. This is where the difficult, if not deadly, combat occurs. The BBEG for the one-shot and probably some minions and perhaps any prisoners and the like are here. Pretty self-explanatory. 5. The reward. The reward is actually often in the same space as the boss fight, like treasure hoards with dragons, but sometimes the reward is in a space beyond, like a room beyond the space where the fight happened. And while the reward can be treasure, it can also be the satisfaction of a job well done and of rescuing the prisoners or whatever. Or it could be getting back to the quest giver and receiving pay for completing the quest, or all of the above. Now let's just quickly list that out again. 1. The Guardian. 2. Social and or combat encounter. 3. Puzzle, trap, and or setback. 4. The boss fight. And 5. The reward. I want to state again that the only encounter required of these 5 is the boss fight. In fact, a decent one-shot can be as few as 3 total encounters. You can combine quest giving with combat, and that's encounter 1. The PCs are in a tavern in a town when it's being invaded by goblin raiders. That's encounter 1. And then you have an encounter where the characters are having a social encounter where they learn the whereabouts of the BBEG and any relevant MacGuffin. That's encounter 2. Then encounter 3 could be the boss fight and reward mixed together. But that was just an example. If you want to have more than just combat in a one-shot, which I recommend, maybe have some more options. And remember that several prepared options simply might not happen, and that's fine. Speaking of combat, remember I said shoot for 2 combats in a 3-hour session? Well, there are some obvious reasons. D&D and other fantasy RPGs famously tout the 3 pillars of encounter types: combat, of course, social, and exploration. Now, exploration includes traps and puzzles, but is otherwise self-explanatory. Social, of course, means non-combat interaction with other beings. People used to call that pillar social role-playing, but really you're role-playing in all 3 pillars. Most tables like to have all 3 covered in a session when possible. There are exceptions. There are groups that prefer social play over everything else. There are those that don't care about anything but combat. But for the most part, people want to experience the whole game. Combat, while fun and necessary for a fulfilling one-shot, can sometimes take a chunk of time to resolve, using up all the time for doing the other 2 pillars. This is why I recommend only 2 prepped combats for a 3-hour session. You can prep more, but have ways for the story to continue without having those combats if time is flying by. Moving the players from into those combats and other encounters that forwards things to the BBEG confrontation within one session will require just a little railroading, but hopefully only a little, and in ways that shouldn't annoy your players. Let me explain. First, you already started the railroad. By getting the players buy-in by pitching the adventure and letting them know about what the goal of the adventure is, you've already set their PCs in a specific direction. Buy-in is one of the best ways to keep players engaged, by the way. This is also true of long campaigns based on thwarting a bad guy and such, but a campaign can spread out and cover side quests and individual character goals, and the boundaries in the world and the plot are so large that grants the players a ton of agency. But most one-shots have a much narrower boundary. In fact, You continued to establish those boundaries by either working with the players on or simply pre-generating motives for the PCs to go on the adventure. And while you can and should try to make multiple paths available for the PCs to choose from for getting from one encounter to another, all roads probably lead to a space after which is the boss. Just try to avoid the PCs going to one room connected to a bunch of other rooms, but they can choose a path that goes straight to the BBEG without any other encounters along the way. Say, rooms might be interconnected or even connecting to more than one room at a time, but have the ones toward the end ideally connect to a room with the final non-boss encounter, preferably non-combat, but it can be if you want. This way, the PCs don't just enter the dungeon, have one encounter, then go straight to the boss, and finish the session having only had 2 adventuring encounters, and there's still an hour left in the session. So, are you forcing at least 3 adventuring encounters? Well, when the PCs first get there, just before the boss and the boss? Yes. Yes, you are. There are ways to actually avoid forcing even the first encounter. So say like the PCs can be given 3 options for where to go to kick things off. Regardless of all that, do your best to have whatever happens in one room due to the PCs being there affect all the other rooms, if possible. Sometimes you can't, but maybe a combat in one encounter wouldn't affect a puzzle in another room, which it wouldn't when you think about it, but it probably will put the guards in another room that might have talked to the PCs first, put them on edge, and therefore be less likely to talk. Or maybe they'll be scared when they're encountered, or in hiding, or both. A word about timing in the boss. Something nifty about this structure is that if time is running out, you can usually move the boss up into either the next room the characters are going to go into, or even into the room they are already in. The boss is what's called a quantum ogre. That just means that regardless of player choices, they are going to encounter the boss. And that's about as railroady as you can possibly get, but hopefully the players have had a decent amount of agency up to that point. So, the word about timing that fight. Pay attention to how long the first combat, if there was one, was in terms of minutes. Lengthen or shorten that time as you think is appropriate for the boss battle to go. Then, when there's roughly that much time left in the session, introduce the boss and any minions they might have and see what happens. If combat was avoided earlier, player agency, right? Then you'll just have to make a rough guess as to how long to do it. But 30 to 45 minutes is a pretty safe bet. Once the boss fight is over and any loot is taken and any MacGuffin is recovered, prisoners or magic items or whatever, then if the PCs are supposed to report back to someone somewhere else to let that person know that they succeeded, well, just skip to that epilogue scene. You're skipping travel once again. That's all it is. Even skipping going back through wherever they've been exploring. You can ignore this if there's still time in the session and the players seem like they'll stay engaged through the additional falling action before the epilogue, but you can usually skip it. Whether or not you have an epilogue, a fun thing to do after the adventure is technically done, if there's some session time left, is to ask the players what their PCs might do next. Like, how do they spend their money? Do they continue on another quest? Do they go home to their parents? Now, since I've already said what I had to say about having backup pre-gens, and I know I promised I had more, I get to wrap this up though. I hope this video gave you some help or inspiration or both. If it did, and you haven't done this yet, hit like and subscribe, set the bell icon to all, and join our awesome GM Philosopher Discord. Link in the description. Now go and watch some of these other cool videos. Till next time.